In this video article, we're going to look at another of my favourite authors. This is part 3 of a 5-part mini-series. That author in question is thriller and mystery writer John Sandford. Now, before we start with John's work, if you want to get an email with a time-stamped overview every time I release a new video, then head over to my website, deliberate-practice.com. Sign up for my email list there. There's other content there. There's some thank you goodies for signing up, and I'll send some email subscriber only written stuff from time to time as well. So do go and do that. And let's have a quick overview of John Sandford. His real name is John Roswell Camp, and originally he was a journalist, and in 1985 he won the Pulitzer Prize for an essay to do with farming. So being a journalist, he's from a journalistic background. He has pretty good writing chops. He began writing fiction in 1989, and he wrote 2 books, one under the name John Roswell Camp and another that was quite different, which was the first Prey book, and that was under the name John Sandford, and that was the book that took off. So he became John Sandford when writing fiction books. The first of that Prey series featured a recurring character called Lucas Davenport. And Lucas Davenport is one of my favourite series characters. Really interesting character. He's smart, he's tough, he's not afraid, afraid's the wrong word. He's not averse to bending the rules if by bending the rules that serves the greater good of society. So he has his own moral code. So in later books, for example, and we'll talk about how he develops as a character through the series, but if you threaten his family, in his moral code allows him to make sure you won't ever threaten his family again. I'll leave it to your imagination what that might entail. What I like about John Sandford's work, he has great characters with believable motives who act in a believable way. And this isn't just Lucas Davenport, it's all the other characters who are in the books, ranging from recurring characters to characters who appear just in one book. And we get viewpoints through the eyes of some of the antagonists, and they're not just cardboard character baddies. We get to understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they're acting in a certain way that they're acting. It gives the writing and the stories some complexity and sophistication, and Sandford uses it masterfully also to build tension as well. So definitely worth reading for those things. Sandford also writes great action scenes. I spoke in the previous video in this series about William Goldman and his writing of action scenes. Obviously, these are gritty, contemporary stories, so the action scenes in these books tend to be different than some of William Goldman's action scenes. Things like car chases, fights, interrogation scenes, that kind of thing. He's another guy who's worth learning scene writing from. He's also great at world building, and that's both scenic, as in what certain areas of Minnesota and the areas that Lincoln is investigating look like, but also sociological. We'll talk more about that in a later slide. And the reason why I included him in this series of mini articles is his series building from book 5 is exemplary. So if you're planning to write some stories and you think you might have a character who you'll write more about, you should definitely read some of these books to see how John does it, because I think he's excellent at it. And in my opinion, I find it much preferable having characters that change, get older, than, say, Lee Child's and the Reacher books, where Reacher essentially doesn't change from the previous book. He's essentially the same character in book 1 as he is in book 25 or 28. So those are some of the things I like about his work. His prose as well is very... I'm going to read a little sample so you can get a flavour for his prose, but I really like the way that he writes. He has a unique style. It's certainly influenced my style when I write like contemporary urban fantasy. I often find that I'm writing in quite a sparser style than you would normally expect in a fantasy style story, and that's, I think, probably influenced mostly by John Sandford. Let's have a quick overview of the Prey series, which is what we're going to talk about. Currently, there are 36 books in the series. There's also two offshoot series featuring two of the characters, which is Virgil Flowers. He appears first in book 17, and Letty, she appears first in book 14. And I haven't read all of the books, and I'll talk about that in the next bullet point, but apparently Flowers and Letty act as co-protagonists in 4 or 5 of the later books. Now, I've not read beyond book 22, and that's not because I don't enjoy the books anymore. It's because in the last few years, my reading material has really flipped from kind of contemporary style mystery detective stuff, things like John Sandford, Jeffrey Deaver, authors of that ilk, and there's much more switched towards more fantasy and historical fiction. People like Guy Gavriel Kay, James Clavell for the historical, and I think the thing that flipped that, and I read a lot of fantasy and historical stuff when I was younger, but I then moved on from that and was reading a lot more kind of contemporary thriller kind of stuff. I think the thing that flipped that switch, if you like, back to fantasy and historical stuff was watching the first 2 or 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, which would be 2010, maybe 2011, and that really pushed my story, the stories that I wanted to read and view, back to those kind of genres. But having said all that, this winter I've got book 22 to book 27 set up on my Kindle, and one of the things I plan to do from a reading perspective is to read a good 5 or 6 of these and see how the character of Lucas develops. So I'm going to talk about reading and reading order. Now, the first 3 books in the series are good. They're not outstanding. They're good. They set the character of Lucas up pretty well, but they're not. So I think you probably should start at least with book 1, to get an idea of Lucas, how Lucas operates, what kind of personality he is. The denouement of book 1 is great as well. I mentioned that Lucas is not averse to bending or breaking the rules if it's in the greater good. That's his moral code, and there's a fantastic example of that in the denouement to book 1, which was totally logical when you read it, but completely unpredictable. I never predicted it, or never thought that would happen. So the ending happened in a way that was logical, emotionally satisfying, but totally unpredictable, and really set up Lucas's character for me. And that friction between being not averse to bending the rules if it's in the greater good and having to maintain the greater good is something that's explored in later books. Now, book 4 in the series, Silent Prey, is a miss in my opinion, because Lucas is sent to New York to do a case which, in terms of law enforcement protocol, is totally unrealistic, makes not much sense. And it's almost like, and I don't know if this is the case, this is just me surmising, the publishers said to Sandford, let's try sending Lucas to New York and see what happens. I'd love to know if the sales numbers weren't great or whether Sandford didn't enjoy it. But when we got to book 5, he goes back to Minnesota and is working around there. And books 5 to 19 are the best continuing series books I think I've ever read. And we'll go into that in more detail in a second. And so let's talk about the things that are done in those books that make the series development outstanding. First of all, the principal character, Lucas, ages in those books. So my memory is he's in his late 20s, around book 5. By the time he gets to book 20, he's in his mid 40s, so he's has to work harder to be fit. and his priorities change, and all of these, the getting older and stuff, affects his worldview as well as his body being affected. His job changes as well. The kind of cases he's involved in change. So I think in book 14, one of the recurring characters, and we'll talk about recurring characters in a second, who was his police chief, is moved up to another role, and she creates a special role for Lucas, and so he moves up to another role which is much more involved with local politics, and he's kind of like her troubleshooter, and so his caseload changes, and these kind of things, getting older, worldview changing, job changing, kind of cases he's changing, kind of cases he's involved in changing because his job has changed. That's all feels totally normal and natural, and how the world actually is, rather than staying at the same level physically and job-wise through 10 books or 15 books. It's just a realistic progression. All of those things are realistic progressions that make Lucas feel like you know him. And I think if you're writing a series character, and not every author writes a series character and has essentially the same character every time, but quite a few do. I think this is the way to do it. And I think the difference in quality part of the reason for the difference in quality between books 5 to 20 odd and the first few books is this. When Sandford, it seems, has made this decision, this is one part of the books going up another level in terms of quality. In the later books, there's also more sociological world building. Talked about sociological world building in other videos, but basically that's how the various law enforcement departments work and interact with each other. It's also how the law enforcement departments interact with local politicians, and because you're dealing with institutionalized forces, it changes the way you have to do things. You can't just go in all guns blazing with something. Some things you have to enter into delicate negotiations with. And it even goes into the TV print medias. There's a character who I think... So in his earlier days, Lucas was a bit of a ladies' man, which changes later on in the series. But one of the female journalists at one of the local TV news stations is someone that he's dated before, and so we get to see him negotiating with her when he wants pieces of information released that will help with the case, and their past sexual histories can create tension and friction. So all those things really help with the series development. They're not just characters, oh, I've got to do this, so this character will help me with this. They're characters who've got backstory with him, so he knows how he might be able to negotiate with them, but he knows that they've got backstory with him too, and they may resist. It just makes the world that we're inhabiting much richer and much more compelling. There's also a cast of returning characters which helps with this. I'll just read some of the names off. There's Weather, there's Dell, who is one of his sidekicks. There's the police chief who I mentioned, Rosemary Rue, who moves up or moves from a different department and takes him with her. There's another detective called Caps Lock, and there's more. In book 14, a character called Letty's introduced. I think Letty is a fabulous character, brilliantly written. I won't say anything more than that, so you've got to read through to find out this character and what she does. Book 17, Virgil Flowers first appears. Everyone refers to him as that fucking Flowers, and he gets his own connected spin-off series that tallies with Lucas. He's another interesting character. I've read some of his spin-off books, and they're quite good. And if you're a readaholic and you want to go away and read 30 books, take 15 of the Prey books and take the first 4 Flower books. Do something like that. But if you're only going to read 10 or so of these books, focus on the Prey books. And the Flowers books are good, but they're not as good. They're like the next rung down from the books I'm talking about, kind of like 5 to 19 in the Prey series. And importantly, and to do with the series development. Just like Lucas, all of these characters change and grow. Their jobs change, they change as people, they enter into relationships, get married, have children, all those things. And all of those things change their worldviews. So when we're reading through the series of books, we feel like we're part of a ever evolving story with all these side stories which create context, friction, interest, backstory. They're the source of, we're scared for certain characters, all those kind of things. So it's the best example of this that I think I've ever seen. So and if you go to some of the ones I've mentioned, and I'm going to mention 5 specific ones in a minute, and look at the blurbs that are on there. You've got blurbs from authors like Stephen King, very highly praising. And I think I picked up the first book, which is called Rules of Prey. I think I picked it up on the strength of reading the back in a bookstore and Stephen King blurbing the front of the novel. Memory's telling me that that's what happened. Anyway, lots of praise for these books. Have really enjoyed them. Looking forward to picking the series back up in the winter. So, to maintain consistency with the 2 previous video articles in the series and the 2 to come, I've chosen 5 books. But ideally, you'd read book 1 to get a sense of the character, and book 1's not a bad book. It's still a good book. I mean, if I wrote a book that was as good as book 1, I'd be very, very happy. It's just not as good as the books that come in the sequence from book 5 to book 19. So I had a hard time picking out 5, but I picked out 5. I picked out Winter Prey, which is number 5. That's the first of the books that really exhibit the series progression that I've just talked about in detail over the last few slides. I picked book 8, Sudden Prey, that explores a specific part of Lucas's moral code and how he applies it when he's threatened and people close to him are threatened. Book 10 is called A Certain Prey. I'm going to read you out a little segment so you can get a flavour of Sandford's writing from here in a minute. This features a hit woman called Clara Rinker, one of my most favourite antagonists I've ever read. Really, if you're not going to read them all, if you're only going to pick one up, I would pick this one, just for Clara Rinker. Fabulous character, and the interactions with Lucas are great. 13, Mortal Prey, Clara Rinker returns, another good one. And then book 14, Naked Prey. Lucas has a new job. He's promoted, or he's not promoted. Rosemarie is promoted, and she sets up a new role, makes Lucas her troubleshooter, and he's married, he's got a young son. And then this book also introduces Letty, who is a great character. So those would be my 5. If you're only going to read 5, they would be the 5 to read. If you're only going to read 1, read number 10. Here's a quick taster. Hang on, let me just go back because I need to set the scene. I have to scroll through those bullets again in a second. So I'm going to give you a quick taster of, this is backstory on Clara Rinker, and the scene is she's 16 and she's been raped, and she works at a seedy nude dancing bar in Sandford's immortal words. The reason she works there is she can either dance naked, fuck for money, or go hungry. So it was a no-brainer. So he's very good at creating character motivations with very simple sentences. So it's something you can learn from him, how to paint a character very quickly with very sparse prose. In the scene I'm about to read from, she's told her bosses that she's been raped. She doesn't want to go to the police. Her bosses don't want her to go to the police because they don't want police snooping around nude dancing clubs. They ask her what she wants them to do, and she says, I want you to get the guy and get him down into the basement. He's some kind of a builder. I'm going to break one of his arms. And they think that's fair enough revenge there. So that in and of itself paints them as characters that they're happy to go along with that because they think that's fair for what's been done to Clara. So let's scroll through these bullets again, and I'll get to the sequence and I'll just read it. And the guy who raped Clara is referred to as Dale O something or Dale something, so just so you know. And then the other two male names are the two brothers who run the bar. So they've just taken him down to the basement, and Dale something says, "I'm going to sue you fuckers for every fucking dime you got," sputtering blood through his split lip. "My fucking lawyer is doing the money dance right now, you fucks." "Fuck you, you ain't doing shit," Ron said. "You raped this little girl." "What do you want, Clara?" Ernie asked. He was standing behind Dale with his arms under Dale's armpits, his hands locked behind Dale's neck. "You want an arm or a leg?" Rinka was standing directly in front of Dale something, who glowered at her. "I'm gonna," he started. Rinka interrupted. "Fuck legs," she said. She whipped the bat up and then straight down on the crown of Dale something's head. The impact sounded like a fat man stepping on an English walnut. Ernie, startled, lost his death grip, and Dale something slipped to the floor like a 200-pound blob of jello. So that's quite a graphic scene in certain ways, but in certain ways it's not, because and I should have said I think the bat was made of aluminium. We don't hear anything about blood splattering anywhere or anything like that. We just get, she brought it down on the crown of his head, and we get this great sentence: "The impact sounded like a fat man stepping on an English walnut." What a great metaphor for something like this. And then he slips to the floor like a 200-pound blob of jello. That's a sample of Sandford's writing. It's direct, it's visceral, it's realistic. As I say, I really like his style of writing. You may not. Some people don't like these kind of contemporary mystery style novels that have lots of swearing and violence, but the violence is never glorified, and the whole point of this scene is to set up the fact that Rinka is a woman whose course of life was changed by this happening, and that she's self-sufficient and she's tough, and she's actually a really interesting antagonist. So hopefully that's not upset anyone with the language and stuff, but if you've not read John Sandford, that's a short sequence that will give you an idea of his writing and his prose style. Okay, in the next episode, I'm going to be looking at the fourth choice of a favourite author in this series of 5. I'm going to cheat a little bit, though, in the next episode, and it's not going to be a single author. It's actually going to be a subgenre which I class as epic dark fantasy. When you see that one and you see the 5 books that I've picked for that one, all by different authors, you'll get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. If you've got any questions or comments, email me, paul@deliberate-practice.com, and I'll get back to you. If you haven't signed up for my email list, do go to deliberate-practice.com and you'll sign up for that, and you'll get the time-stamped overviews of each video as they're released. Plus there's other stuff you'll get as well. And if you're a frustrated or aspiring fiction writer, then check out the resource I'm putting together called The Writing Vault. Things get added to it on an almost daily basis. The link will be in the description below this video. Go check that out. If you've got questions on it, just don't hesitate. Just drop me an email. The email address is there. Ask me about it and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one when we look at 5 books in the epic dark fantasy genre.